starting a new job, it's always a little awkward, right? Like you're trying to figure out the rules, the culture, where everything is.
Oh, tell me about it.
But imagine doing all that in a whole new country, on top of being a refugee.
Wow, yeah. I can see how that would be a whole other level of challenging.
And that's what we're digging into today. I was reading this fascinating research you shared, Professor Weerahanadij Dulini Anovinda Fernando, published in Human Relations. It's about skilled refugees and how they navigate UK workplaces, which, let's be honest, can be pretty tough.
It's a really insightful study. And unfortunately, the findings aren't always easy to hear.
Yeah, because even though these individuals have the skills and qualifications, many still feel like outsiders.
Right. And it's not always about like a language barrier or lacking technical skills. Sometimes it's much more subtle than that.
Exactly. There was this one software developer in the study who mentioned feeling behind because he just wasn't used to the specific IT systems used in UK offices.
That's such a good example of how it's not just about actual skills, but it's also about perceived skills.
Yeah.
And those perceptions, they're often shaped by cultural background, which can create a real sense of being an outsider.
Absolutely. It's like you're always trying to catch up, even if you have the experience. But what really struck me was how these individuals adapt. Professor Fernando identifies 3 main strategies, and they're way more strategic than just trying to blend in.
Oh, definitely. These are really active approaches to navigating a new cultural space.
The first one, leveraging the past to contribute to the present. That one really stood out to me. Instead of trying to hide their background, they're actually using it as a strength.
Yeah, it's about reframing those differences as assets.
Right. Like, there's this example of a data scientist, originally from Iran. She talked about how the strong emphasis on family and community in Iranian culture actually helped her build strong relationships with her colleagues in the UK. She even said, "We Iranians, we're very friendly. We love to have guests in our homes." It's like she turned what some people might see as a cultural difference into this asset, her ability to build strong relationships.
It's a brilliant example of cultural intelligence in action. It's not just about understanding different cultures, it's knowing how to navigate those differences effectively. And sometimes that means highlighting what makes you unique.
It's like she's challenging this idea that there's only one right way to connect with colleagues. And it's not just about being friendly. There was another person, a manager, who talked about how her upbringing actually shaped her leadership style. She said, "In my community, if you say you are sick, nobody would just walk away after saying, 'I hope you feel better soon.' They would try to get you medicine and wait with you and do everything for you." And she directly connected that compassion to how she leads her team.
I mean, that's powerful. It really highlights how valuable those diverse perspectives can be, especially in today's workplaces.
Okay, so that's leveraging the past, but then there's minimizing the past to merge into the present. And it almost feels like the opposite.
It is, in a way. It's like recognizing when it's actually more beneficial to downplay those differences, to try to blend in a little bit, not denying who you are, but finding that common ground.
It reminds me of that feeling when you start a new job. You kind of want to show you're a team player, not rock the boat too much, at least not right away.
Right, you're trying to get a feel for the place.
And the study gives this example of an architect. He's at this high-profile firm, and he talked about how he'd deal with not always understanding the humor in the office. He said, "Well, 10% of the conversations I do not understand, I would just be laughing."
I love that. Choosing humor to kind of like bridge that cultural gap.
Exactly. And sometimes this minimizing the past involved highlighting the diversity of the workplace itself. Like this one engineer, he was working with people from, get this, over 40 nationalities. And he was like, "I don't feel like I'm weird or foreign."
It's like by emphasizing the sheer variety of backgrounds, he's normalizing his own otherness.
Right. Makes it less about him standing out, more about the whole environment being diverse.
And it also suggests that the organization itself plays a role here, right? Like creating an environment where those differences are accepted and even celebrated can make a huge difference.
Totally. It makes you wonder, how much does company culture really impact how comfortable people feel bringing their whole selves to work?
Right. It's a two-way street for sure.
Okay, so we've got leveraging the past, where you highlight your differences, and minimizing the past, where you downplay them. Now get ready for the third one, because this one really flips the script. Professor Fernando calls it mobilizing the past to adapt to the present.
And this one's really about owning your story, using your past experiences, skills, your whole history to show not just how you're capable of adapting, but how you already possess the skills to succeed.
So it's about connecting the dots between your background and your current role in a way that showcases your competence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes That means directly challenging assumptions.
Yeah, like one person's study actually had to explain why, as a refugee, he still spoke English fluently. And he was basically like, look, not all refugees fit the stereotype. I had a privileged background and a good education, which, kind of highlights how pervasive those stereotypes can be in the first place, right?
Unfortunately, yes. But it also shows the importance of self-advocacy, of being willing to correct those misconceptions and present a more accurate picture of yourself.
For sure. And there's this really interesting example of a manager originally from Pakistan. He said that growing up in a developing country actually made him more adaptable. He basically said that in Pakistan, you have to figure things out on your own because there isn't always someone to guide you.
It's like turning a perceived disadvantage into a strength.
Totally. He flipped the script and showed how those experiences were actually assets in his career. So we're seeing how these strategies, they're not just about fitting in, they're about demonstrating competence, proving you belong.
Absolutely. And that can be so essential when you're trying to build a career in a new country, especially as a refugee, where you might already be facing unconscious bias or prejudice.
It's like you have to work even harder to prove yourself.
Sadly, that can be the case. But what's really interesting is that sometimes the people in the study used multiple strategies.
Oh, like they'd switch it up depending on the situation?
Exactly. They'd leverage their past in one situation, then downplay it in another.
Yeah.
It's almost like...
code switching, but with your whole cultural background.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And it raises all these questions about... It's like they're reading the room, aren't they? Figuring out the best way to connect, to demonstrate their skills and experience, which... Let's be honest, we all do to some extent.
Oh, absolutely. We all put on different hats depending on who we're with. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this study really highlights how much more complex that becomes when you factor in cultural differences and, the experience of being a refugee.
The stakes are definitely higher to get it right. And it makes you wonder, is this something unique to refugees, or could anyone benefit from, thinking more strategically about how they present their past experiences, especially in a work setting?
That's such a good question because, on the one hand, refugees are dealing with some very specific and unique challenges.
For sure.
But then on the other hand, I think, haven't we all felt like an outsider at some point, trying to find where we fit in?
Totally. New job, new city, new group of friends. There's always that adjustment period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something we can all learn from this, from the adaptability, the resilience that these skilled refugees are demonstrating. Professor Fernando's research, I think it really challenges us to rethink what it means to fit in and how we can all leverage our own unique experiences, to thrive in different environments.
One thing that really stuck with me was this engineer from Iran. He said that working hard was the only solution he could think of to overcome any challenge at work. And it just makes you think about how much our backgrounds shape our approaches to work, even if we don't realize it.
Absolutely. We all have these ingrained responses, these default ways of approaching problems, interacting with colleagues. And so much of that is influenced by, our upbringing, our experiences.
Just what if those backgrounds and experiences are skills too? Not just technical skills, but things like resilience, adaptability, cultural intelligence.
Right. It's like this whole other dimension of talent that we don't always acknowledge or even recognize.
This deep dive has been so insightful. It's amazing how much we can learn from just one study.
I know, right? Professor Fernando's work, it provides such a nuanced look at a really complex issue. And it challenges us to think differently about cultural differences in the workplace, about the hidden strengths that people bring to the table.
And it reminds us that sometimes those things that make us different are the things that make us most valuable. So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe this is something for all of you listening to ponder. When did you feel like an outsider? Was it a new job, maybe, or did you move somewhere new? What was that like?
Did you find yourself trying to fit in by downplaying your differences, or did you try to use them to your advantage?
It's interesting to think about, isn't it? How much of that is conscious and how much is just us reacting in the moment? It makes you wonder, how much do our backgrounds shape how we handle those moments, even if we haven't, moved to a new country or gone through something as significant as seeking refuge?
Absolutely. All those experiences, they become part of us. They influence how we communicate, how we build relationships, even how we solve problems.
This deep dive has really made me think about those subtle ways we all adapt to different situations, different cultural contexts, sometimes without even realizing it.
It's like we're constantly reading the room, adjusting our approach to better connect with the people around us.
Oh,
And what's fascinating is how often those experiences, the ones that make us different, those become our biggest strengths.
it's like Professor Fernando's research is saying, hey, those things you think might hold you back, they might actually be the things that help you get ahead.
Exactly. Diversity isn't just something to be tolerated, it's a source of strength, of innovation.
It's been such a fascinating conversation. I always learn so much from these deep dives, and this one's really got me thinking differently about myself, about my own experiences, and how those have shaped the way I navigate the world.
We too. It's a good reminder that we all have something unique to offer, and that those differences, there's something to be celebrated.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Thanks for joining us for this fascinating look at how skilled refugees find their place in UK workplaces. We'll catch you next time.